A game of chess is like a sword fight. You must think first, before you move.
Hey everybody, this is a chess commentary brought to you by the Portland Chess Shop on Dmitry Jakovenko's Cool Wizard playing on the Internet Chess Club against I Am Sherlock. And this is a Blitz commentary. They're playing this chess live. They played it in January on the 12th, on the 21st of 2012. And I got a Lao Tzu Art of War quote because I think that should start our game. So, when troops are on guard in many places, they're perforce scattered into small bands. The more defenses you induce your enemy to adopt, the more impoverished your enemy will be. So I'm going to see if Jakovenko attacks in this way, where he creates his opponents to guard many different squares, and then is able to overwork them. I think that's what we saw in the last game, and that's our, that's our plan for this game. Anyway, so we have a game of, we have d4, knight f6, c4, g6 was played. So sort of a Grunfeld type position. The pawn on c4 was taken back with the queen, which is interesting. So the queen is moving a couple different times. b5 is played, which is kind of an anti-positional move, but at the same time it gains space and forces the queen to move again, so it's played with tempo. Now e4 is played. c5 attacks the center. I think that's a good, solid move. Jakovenko is a little pissed about losing his last game, and he wants to win this game, I think. But he is down on time already. He's down about 50 seconds. So he's playing a little bit untraditionally, but it's not totally clear that it's been good for him. He needs to make a move pretty quickly, or he could run low on time, which, as we know, could become disastrous, because when you run out of time in a blitz chess game, you lose the game. There's two ways to win. You checkmate the king, and that's why attacking the king is so fundamental to chess, or you run out of time. So even if you have a great position, you have mate in one, you run out of time, the game is over. So what's happened here is the queens have been traded off, and the king on d2, the king could be a strength in the center if a few more pairs of pieces are traded off. But with this many pieces on the board, it could become a weakness too. It could become a target, because rooks and bishops are pretty good against the king. Jakovenko is down on time significantly here. He's down 1 minute and 20 seconds. He plays knight b5, which doesn't attack anything directly. But the problem was that he couldn't castle because the e7 pawn would fall, because that bishop on h5, that dark square bishop that white has, is pretty active over there. But now Rook b1 is played, which I think is a really good move, because what is this knight exactly doing? The knight could take on a2, but then it'll be a little bit trapped. Maybe he's thinking of the wild goose chase quote from the Art of War in the last game. But no, here he says that he's forced to retreat because it's just too dangerous to take on a2. Bishop takes b5, and then rook takes back, and then the other rook swings over and traps the knight. So he plays knight back to c6. So the b5 pawn is attacked twice. It could fall pretty easily, but at the same time the d4 pawn is attacked twice. So he could only win that pawn if he gives away a pawn, which would also centralize the other player's king. d5 is played, which looks like a good move, because it says, okay, now my pawn's not falling, your knight can move, and then I'll take on b5 and I'll be up a pawn. That's the thinking of I Am Sherlock, and Cool Wizard is going to have to think of some pretty crafty things to get out of this, because as black in this position, I think he has a disadvantage. These white pawns on e4 and d5 in the center are pretty dominating. Both players have the bishop pair. Now it's dark squared bishop versus dark squared bishop, so we don't see a case of opposite colored bishops, but we still see this bishop on h4 is pretty powerful, attacking this e7 pawn. Black plays rook c8, activating the rook that's on the queen side, which is good, but I'm afraid that that it won't be enough. That the rook on h8 is the rook that I'm concerned about for black. So here he plays rook to b7, which makes sense, attacking the e7 square, threatening check, and then taking the other bishop. f6 is played. A little bit anti-positional, because it's putting his bishop on the same color, putting his pawn on the same color as his bishop and fixing it there. But it makes sense too, because it just seemed like he had to do something a little bit drastic to save his position. Because that bishop on h5, it's in the corner attacking a few less squares, but it's just attacking this key square e7 because there was still a pawn there. So now rook to c4 is played. It looks like Jakovenko has solved some of his troubles, because he's going to be able to get his rooks out, but it just looks like e7 is still falling. He attacks it he defends with the bishop, but the square on e5 I'm concerned about. I'm concerned that e5 could be played immediately, which would be a huge tactic, because then the bishop on h4 would fall, but the bishop on d6 would fall too, and then that pawn could become a queen. So we have 2 minutes and 46 seconds against 2 minutes and 11 seconds. We do see this powerful pawn push. It looks like it could be devastating. Jakovenko will have to find some sort of a remarkable defensive tactic to try and save the game. The problem is that when the rook on c4 takes the bishop on h4, then pawn takes bishop, and the black pawn can't take back the white pawn because it's pinned. These doubled rooks on the e file are just dominating. Even if he tries to take with the pawn, but pawn takes e5, then bishop takes e7. I'm sure is a possibility, because then after bishop takes, rook takes check, and the king is really weak. He might have to retreat to the first rank. E5 can be played, threatening checkmate on a with the rook. Just looks like it could be pretty devastating. So he plays bishop b4, which I think makes sense. He's like, okay, I have to move the bishop, and maybe I can. It's a check. Maybe I have some sort of shot. A sacrifice is played, followed by bishop takes f6. So an interesting move. It wasn't completely necessary, I don't think, but it seems really powerful. Well, or at least that it could be powerful. So I think that the rook is going to have to defend the e7 pawn. We see that the e7 pawn still hasn't moved, and that's why it's such a weakness. d6 is played. This is the idea that I am Sherlock had behind, was that, okay, maybe one rook against two passed pawns and a bishop. Two passed pawns and a bishop must be better. That's what he's thinking. So he could play rook takes here, rook takes, bishop takes, and then the king can't take on e4 because pawn push is just looks... It'll queen. The rook could sacrifice, I think. No, he has to play pawn takes back. So the king plays back to f7 because it has to guard the e8 square. Let's see if this rook can do some mischief. The rook centralizes itself. I think that makes sense. GM Cool Wizard, though, is only at 56 seconds, while I Am Sherlock has 2 minutes and 10 seconds. So the I Am with the white piece is just really taking a huge time advantage in this game. It's going to be hard to come back because it's hard to, play perfectly if your opponent tries to avoid simplifications. He's kind of thinking about a strategy. He's like, okay, I want to plan out the next few moves, and so that I can start to play quickly. How can I win this game? So it looks like he goes, okay, my A pawn is a threat. It is a passed pawn. His king can't divert from defending it because then I'll be able to queen one of the E pawns. So I'll give up the pawns on the F, the G, and the H file and just try and queen this pawn, which I think is really ambitious. I think it's a cool idea. The rook decides that it can't afford to take the G or the H pawns because this A pawn is just too dangerous. It's going, gone. And we'll see that maybe the A1 square isn't that good to defend because possibly you could play E6 check trying to take the rook on A1 is what I'm thinking. You know what I mean? Like you sack the rook, but then you queen on E8. Like you sack the bishop or the pawn, and then you queen. So rook A2 is played. A pretty close game, but it looks like the king could just march, C7 to B7, try to advance his pawn, possibly. But maybe black's trying to bank on some infinite checks here. But this is the move that I was talking about. The E6 move, he can't take with the king because then the pawn will queen on E8, so he has to retreat. And now the B2 pawn is the B2 square is covered for the bishop, so it's tough to see how he can stop the king from advancing. Bishop C3 is played. I wonder what key squares that holds. Oh, he's trying to play Bishop A5 and then just advance the pawn that way. Like hold the, make sure that the rook can't even take the pawn anymore. So if king takes E7, then Bishop A4 will be played, and then after checks, the king moves. But the idea is that I'm just going to queen this pawn. Like you can't. I'm going to guard the line. So we have 15 seconds, though, against 50 seconds, which is a huge difference. The rook plays back to C7, but how can it stop this pawn? No, the king comes up, rook to E8. It looks like he's going to play bishop to B8 and then queen the queen. And the queen will easily outmatch the rook. Oh, he just goes ahead and checks first. So it's a bishop and two pawns against two pawns, but the bishop and two pawns is way too powerful. Especially with 30 extra seconds. So I would say this game is GG at this situation. He's going to have to move this pawn. I think he could play maybe G4 all the way. No, he decides that he could sack the pawn because the H2 pawn will still hold. So then after king F5, he's attacking the pawn. He plays king G5. One pawn falls for the other side, but black just can't take the H2 pawn, and the G4 pawn is going to fall. And that is the game. I Am Cool Wizard loses at has black against I Am Sherlock, who wins as white. Thank you very much for watching this. This is the Portland Chess Shop. Please like us. Watch our other videos. Appreciate it. Thank you very much. Have a good night. Bye.